it's Drybear. At the start of the year, a company called Pocketpair released a game called Palworld to Steam, and it was an overnight success. It reached over 2 million CCU, and a lot of people were playing it. And there were a lot of concerns at the time around whether this game was infringing on Pokemon, because it is very Pokemon adjacent. Even the owner and CEO of Pocketpair admitted that they're a big fan of Pokemon, and for the longest time, this was called Pokemon with guns, because that's kind of what it is. And there was questions on whether Pokemon / Game Freak / Pokemon Company were going to file lawsuits or try to get legally involved with Pocketpair over the similarity between their titles. And for most of this year, that was true. There wasn't really any major action, and Pocketpair hadn't really received much in the way of C&D, no takedown requests, no filing of lawsuits or anything, until yesterday. Yesterday, we got an official lawsuit filed with the Tokyo courts, claiming that Pocketpair has infringed upon patents that Nintendo and the Pokemon Company own over something that exists in the Palworld game. Now, the lawsuit is specifically a patent infringement. I was expecting it to be some kind of IP rights or some kind of copyright enforcement, but it's actually patent infringement in this case. And so I spent some time looking through some of the patents that Pokemon Company and Nintendo own, and for the most part, I can't find any that are directly related to Palworld specifically, except for this one. Now, here's the official statement from Nintendo. They are identifying themselves and including the Pokemon Company in this patent infringement lawsuit and targeting Palworld. They don't necessarily say which patents, they don't give any patent numbers or any specific infringements, but they are filing a lawsuit for infringement of patent rights against Pocketpair. Now, I'm not a lawyer, and I've just spent some time reading through some of the patents that they currently publicly own, especially ones that are owned at least in the US and some other locations that are very obvious around the Pokemon system. Most of these are technical patents, by the way. They have a lot of technical patents for a lot of their peripherals. They have like the Switch docking system they've patented, any of their consoles over the last 10, 20, 30 years. A lot of that is mostly technical around the storage, development, and the physical apparatuses that they developed for their company, but they do have some game design related patents. It's rumored that they have patents around throwing balls and catching monsters as part of their pocket monster Pokemon system, like throwing the Pokeballs and capturing monsters, but I haven't found any official public patents that go around that. So if anyone finds those, let me know in the comments down below. But they do have one around the gamification of health awareness based on sleep patterns, and they do have some patents around breeding as well. So taking care of virtual characters, monsters, pets, whatever it is, growing and helping them grow and get stronger and stay healthy. But specifically, they have a lot of patents around the sleep awareness, going to sleep, waking up, managing the sleep and health of the character, which is something that's a big part of Palworld as well, since it is kind of both in a RPG, like monster collecting RPG, but it's also a simulation game. You're going to be building factories and conveyor belts and having the pals work and mine things and develop things and work on your farm and stuff like that. And the pals in Palworld do have health awareness, mental health. They get depressed, they break their ankle. They have to make sure that they sleep throughout the night and they wake up rested, and if they aren't rested, that sort of thing. So maybe this is one of the patents they're talking about being infringed upon, but it's kind of odd to me because a lot of games do this. It's a very simulation heavy style idea and concept that not just Palworld utilizes. Now, there's also an argument that goes around the copyright and design of this, and having worked in the game development industry for a while myself, I can tell you that there's definitely a big concern around having names, art, characters, visual representations, all kinds of things that are representative in your game that might be very similar to other games. So you're seeing some of the comparisons that people have made between Pokemon and Pals that exist on, in the games that might be incredibly similar. Now, unfortunately, especially globally, it is incredibly difficult to enforce these kinds of comparisons because you really have to have like a lot of different components coming together in order to be able to enforce these properly, because some of these are just subjective, right? You can make the argument that yes, one is a wolf, the other is a wolf, and obviously wolves have their own, visual aesthetic that you have to represent in order for people to understand that it is a wolf, and so similarities might be there. But I think when a lot of these start lining up, people start questioning whether it was just kind of a ripoff of the original with Pokemon versus Palworld in general. But what we're not seeing here is we're not seeing a IP, like intellectual property. It's not a creative enforcement. It is specifically a patent enforcement that we're seeing with this specific lawsuit. And also, having worked with some legal systems around the development of copyrights and intellectual properties, there is one thing that's worth referencing here, and it's why you see, there's situations where, there was that solo developer that he tried to recreate Duke Nukem and bring it back to life, and then it got shut down by the original developer, and a lot of people felt like it was, why are they, making one person get shut down on this? And the reference I use for this is a very common reference, is that in a lot of legal systems, what gets utilized, right? Because the law, and again, I'm not a lawyer, the law is not black and white. It's mostly what you can prove, what you can argue, and where that comes from. And as things get developed over time, you start to develop what's called precedent, which means that there's enough previous history to allow you to make decisions based on that history. One of the best examples of this is like Band-Aid or Kleenex. There's an idea that if you don't actively defend your intellectual property or your copyrights, eventually you will lose the ability to defend them because you had, that way it prevents people from weaponizing it, right? So a great example is like Band-Aid. They didn't defend their name. Band-Aid is not the name of a bandage you put on yourself. It is a brand name. It is like an actual product. But because they didn't actively defend their name, Band-Aid became a very common colloquial phrase where some people say, hey, go get a Band-Aid, especially in the West, like North America, the United States, things like that. Band-Aid is not the name of the bandage. It is a name that wasn't defended and became commonplace to be commonly used by anyone. Same thing for Kleenex, for tissues, for nose tissues, stuff like that. So there's the idea that if you don't actively defend your copyrights, you can lose the ability to do so. And so that's why Nintendo or anyone else sometimes goes after the little guy, because sometimes they don't want to go after the little guy, but they have to in order to retain the rights to defend their copyright to anyone. So that way they're not picking and choosing people to punish randomly rather than, going after every single person. So that might be kind of like, maybe this is just a combination of everything that we're seeing, right? It's a combination of all the characters in the game that look similar, the idea that you're taking a ball and you're throwing and catching the characters, the idea that they've infringed on some of their patents around managing the health, sleep patterns, and general breeding of characters and monsters in games, with all of those other things in mind, and also talking about just the general development of the game itself. Now, there isn't really I don't think this is a slam dunk, and obviously they're coming to Palworld, a whole bunch of months later. This game launched earlier this year and it still is doing pretty well, right? So we're seeing early this year, so early February or January is where we first saw Palworld. It peaked at over 2 million CCU on Steam, and out available on other platforms as well. And they had kind of all of this come down, and then when the game settled as where it's at, it's still hovering at about 20 to 30k CCU, which is a very active, successful game. Anything over 15,000 CCU, even if it's just that number on a specific platform like PC, in this case Steam, it makes it a very successful game. It can be heavily monetized and can make a lot of money, especially given that this is not a free-to-play game. It is a buy-to-play game on that standpoint as well. And every time they release a new major patch, like they did in April or like they did again in June with their new island and all of that, they are still getting new players, peaking at over 100,000 CCU for that initial launch and content, and then settling down to a core number of players. So the game is still doing very well, and they plan to have more updates coming along with that as well. And I'm very curious to see if there are specific patents other than this one based on sleep patterns and breeding that they are going to be referencing in it. Since it's just a public notice, they haven't made the actual lawsuit details public yet. They just made a public announcement of their intent and claimed that they have already filed the lawsuit with the Tokyo courts. Pocketpair is aware of this, and it is public, but the details of the lawsuit has not been made public yet. And following the news, Pocketpair put out a public response to the lawsuit on their official website regarding the lawsuit. Yesterday, a lawsuit was filed against our company for patent infringement. We have received the notice and we begin the appropriate legal proceedings. At this moment, we are unaware of the specific patents we are accused of infringing upon. I don't think anyone, if they don't know, we don't know, and we have not been notified of such details. Pocketpair is a small indie game company based in Tokyo. Our goal as the company has always been to create fun games. games. They talk about how much they enjoy making it, and they will continue improving Palworld and strive to create a game that our fans can be proud of. It is unfortunate, and yes, it absolutely is, that they'll be forced to allocate time and money to matters unrelated to game development, and they'll do their utmost to our fans to ensure that the game developers are not hindered or discouraged from pursuing their creative ideas. And this could end up being just because they're both in Tokyo. This is not an international thing. This might just be a, like, you know, Tokyo courts specific lawsuit that relates to local laws or local restrictions around how they're using it. But until we know exactly what Nintendo and the Pokemon Company and Game Freak intend to enforce on their patents, it's hard to know exactly what is here. But it has been most of this year, they've been kind of quiet and leaving them alone. Pocketpair has been developing new updates. They've had 2 major releases since the launch of Palworld in order to keep the game thriving and moving. And I'm very curious to see what they end up enforcing patent-wise. And it could just be a case of, you know, if you don't use your patents, you lose them, or if you don't defend them, you lose the ability to defend them, or you lose them entirely. So I'm very curious to see what it is. But let me know what you think about this. Was this a long time coming? Should they have done this sooner? And what exactly are they getting at with this kind of lawsuit?
If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.